Welcome to the CEO Tech Talks podcast, where vision meets impact. I am your host, Ambreen Ahmed. Each episode, I sit down with exceptional leaders who are shaping the future of business, technology, and transformation. This show is about more than just success. It's about clarity, purpose, and those bold decisions that light the way forward. Join me as we uncover the insights, challenges, and breakthroughs from today's most inspiring voices. Leaders who are redefining what it means to lead in a rapidly changing world. This is CEO Tech Talks. Let's dive in. Today, we're exploring one of the most urgent challenges of our time, how to secure data in an AI-driven world. My guest is Kajal Deepak of SmartVerify, a company rethinking authentication, permissioning, and reporting to create a new model of data security. Welcome, Kajal, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Kajal, can you share your professional journey and what led you to create SmartVerify?
Yes. So I spent most of my career as a product person at Microsoft and AWS, and eventually ended up running engineering teams in AWS. My last role was as a general manager for a security and compliance service. I launched a new service called AWS Audit Manager, which was basically responsible for security and compliance posture management. So that gave me a great overview of how customers were trying to handle security on the cloud. And it also gave me an early preview of the challenges that were coming up with generative AI. And the biggest realization was, Ambreen, that we are entering a significant architectural shift. The entire architecture of how we build applications is changing, and I realized it has huge implications for data security. I also realized that existing players are in a bit of an innovator's dilemma. How do you go and tell your customers that the millions of dollars that they are paying you for security may not really be keeping them secure anymore? And that opens up the door for a startup to come in and redefine how data security should be done with this architecture shift. So I decided to leave my general manager role at AWS and jump in and take on this challenge. And that's how SmartVerify was born.
That's intense. What does a typical day look like for you?
It's a lot of conversations, lot of brainstorming, talking to potential customers, talking to potential partners, trying to fundraise, talking to my team members, whiteboarding, and working on our engineering design, on how the prototypes are coming along. It's pretty intense. And I think one of the things I'm learning is that being in a corporation, you work on building a product, but building as a company is a little bit of a different ballgame. So honestly, I'm learning, Ambreen. It's a journey.
How are you enjoying this journey?
It is awesome. I kind of feel like we are living in really interesting times in a good way. Like, I think the shift in the industry is a huge opportunity for everyone. So I'm definitely having fun. It's challenging, but I feel like I'm living intensely. Love it.
So what gaps in existing security models did you see that made you realize enterprises needed a new approach to data security?
Yeah, so I think this goes back to the architectural shift that I referred to. So we have been living in a layered architecture for a while, since the net era happened, which means like you have the persistent layer, the data layer, and then you have the application layer, and then you have the UX. And the UX can be anywhere, iPhone or wherever else. This entire stack was being secured by using network access management and identity access management. So that ensures that you know who from the UX is accessing your stack. But within the stack itself, the interesting thing is that enterprises never really focused on data security. Data security has actually been essentially a part of application security. So generally, you are securing who has access to the application, the different users that log into it. But the access that the application has to the data is mostly a freeway. And in most enterprises, over time, what ends up happening is that no one can really track why a policy was set up. So an application has access to a data set, maybe it was read, write, like multiple access. 18 months later, nobody remembers why that access was really set up, what was the real purpose. And so nobody can ever remove that access. So even though least privilege is a very accepted industry standard and goal, in reality, what happened in that layered architecture was that applications had too much access to data. Now, when we think about the shift that's happening, that application layer has exploded. And that application layer is no longer a neutral layer. That layer itself has active elements in it, like the LLM, which is accessing your data. It has AI agents, which are accessing your data, sometimes in ways that you don't really see and you don't control. And then there might be MCP servers and who knows what. So that application layer is changing significantly because of generative AI. This really puts the ball in the enterprise court because now you actually have to do something about data security, very different from the model that we have lived in earlier. And that's exactly the gap that I see. Identity and network access management are no longer sufficient because the threat is coming from inside your network, from the application itself, which can become essentially a pipe to LLMs or external sources.
So how does SmartVerify help organizations rethink authentication, permissioning, and monitoring in the age of AI?
Yes. So we have a couple of big insights based on which we are working on our product. So one insight is that we believe that applications can no longer be trusted. That's really the model. Like I described, that architecture shift implies that you cannot just rely on application security. You have to secure the data set. The second thing is that we believe that AI is going to be more of a buy model rather than a build model, in the sense that most enterprises, it'll take a long time before they have enough data science capability and enough data to do their own real AI applications. So in order to leverage all the innovation that's happening, enterprises will have to bring in third-party AI applications. So when you look at these two factors, like, hey, applications cannot be trusted, even the ones you trusted earlier, like ServiceNow and Adobe are injecting agents into those applications, plus the new applications that you want to adopt will be third-party. Essentially, it means that we need to decouple application security and data security. So what SmartVerify is building is a new authentication and permissioning model that applies at the data set level. And we basically treat every application as an external element that's trying to access your data. So we put a control point between the application and the data set. That's really how SmartVerify works.
Okay, well, that was my question. How are you protecting the stack, the data stack?
Yes. Yeah, so think about it like this, like way back again in the .NET era, when the internet came along, we had internal networks. Universities had internal networks, companies had internal networks. And then this big thing came along, and you had an access pattern that was thousands times higher. Like the networks were going to be accessed much, much more than ever had happened before. And you had people trying to come into your internal networks that you don't know who they are, like they're not trusted people. So there was this big access pattern that happened, and we had to come up with this concept of a firewall, like a network firewall, to start to manage and decouple those two elements, the internal versus the external. Essentially, SmartVerify, think about it as a data firewall that is being put in front of your data set to protect it from that external access. So we define all AI access as external access.
So, wow, that's a lot of I'm just following this whiteboard diagram in the air right now while you were talking. I wish we had a whiteboard.
Yeah.
What industry trends are you seeing around AI-driven data use, and how are those shaping the way enterprises think about security?
Yeah, so when I think about industry trends, what I am seeing is a couple of things. One is there is a lot of testing happening. There is curiosity and interest in the promise of AI. Not as much adoption is able to happen in the enterprise for a couple of reasons. One is that AI is moving really fast. So by the time people finish their proof of concepts, what they find is that what they tested is already obsolete. And why would you adopt something that's already obsolete? And the other thing is that look at this velocity disconnect. Your data is pretty static layer, and that AI layer is moving so fast that you can barely adopt it. So how do you keep vetting it all the time as it changes? This challenge is actually causing enterprises to be frozen, even though the interest levels are extremely high and proof of concepts are happening, testing is happening. But how do you actually do adoption till you can find a way to resolve this tension in this velocity of the two different layers that must interact with each other? So again, SmartVerify is that mediator, which becomes essentially a wrapper in front of your data sets. And it allows you to work with AI applications. Even when they change, you don't have to go back and reset all the policy on your data set. So that's one trend that I'm seeing in the enterprises is like interest, but no adoption. Then there is a second trend that I'm seeing, which is really happening, I would say more in the tech industry itself, where, some of the more deterministic workflows, like writing software is actually a fairly deterministic thing. You know exactly the syntax, you know exactly the logic. That's where AI is being adopted most rapidly. And in the software industry, we have well-defined software development life cycles, which allow us to do quality control. So the software industry itself is less exposed to the hallucinations and other issues that come with AI. So I see the biggest adoption happening in productivity tools, and especially in software within the tech industry itself. So in some ways, you could say that the tech industry is eating itself, while the enterprise is still trying to figure out how to match the pace in order to adopt AI. Those are the two big trends I see.
Okay. How is that shaping your strategy?
Yeah, the way I see this is my product is an enabler for AI adoption. It's a SaaS service because we need to build a bridge between where customers are today, enterprises are today, and where they need to go. And that bridge means that you have to start with where the data is. That's where we are grounded. So my service, essentially, it's really cloud focused at the moment, like AWS and Azure. And the goal is that you should be able to put this service in front of your data sets on AWS and Azure. And then you are able to interact with any of the AI applications while you manage your policy from a centralized place. So that's what we're doing right now.
Does that have any relation to data science as a service?
Yes. So like I said, my take on this is that AI is going to be much more of a buy model rather than a build model. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you are an insurance company and you are facing all of these rising costs because of climate issues. There are fires, there are floods, there are hurricanes. Insurance companies are obviously facing a lot of challenges there. But an insurance company will not develop a climate model. That's going to come from somewhere else. It's going to come from somewhere where there is access to that large amount of data, and there is access to data science resources, and there is the ability to pay for all the compute and storage, and all of that goes into actually building out a large climate model. So insurance companies will find themselves in a situation, and this is a hypothetical example, where someone builds that model. There is going to be a company that will build that model. And the insurance companies will want to use that. So when I go to, let's say, State Farm, and I say, hey, this is Kajal's house. Kajal wants to buy this house. I want insurance. State Farm can still ask me all the questions, like, my relationship is with them. Do you have a basement, flooding risk? What is the materials in the house, fire risk? Like those are the type of questions. But then ultimately, they will have to run it through that climate model to really be able to assign a risk score. So it's an example where we will see a lot of high productivity scenarios that enterprises don't want to walk away from. Like, do you really want to be the insurance company that cannot do climate scoring? But that means you have to give access to your customer data, which is protected data under law, to that model in real time in order to get that quote. So we are going to come up against these scenarios where enterprises will have to be able to take advantage of AI applications by exposing data in real time. And right now, we do not have any product in the market that enables that. And that's what I'm trying to build.
So why do you believe real-time secure data access will be critical for unlocking the true economic value of enterprise data?
I think generative AI gives us, so think about what it saves us from. It saves us from all of those integrations and workflows. Like you don't have to click through screens and links. It takes you from intention to outcome immediately. You just tell ChatGPT, here's what I want to do. Build me an itinerary for travel to Belize. And it'll collect all the data. You don't have to click through multiple websites. So when you think about the speed of doing business and how quickly that data can be crunched and conclusions and insights can be received, tremendous value for customers, tremendous value for businesses. And the only way to unlock that value is to be able to access that data and use it in real time. We have no time to prep and clean and stage and sync copies. If we do all that, we have given up on the value that generative AI is unleashing for us. So I believe this is going to be an imperative for enterprises to find a model.
So how are these market shifts that we've talked about in the last few minutes here, how are they influencing your strategy at SmartVerify, both in terms of technology development and client engagement?
So obviously, like in terms of technology development, like the service I'm talking about in a simple term can be described as, imagine if Okta and Wiz got married, except that instead of doing identity, now they are doing data access control. That's the easiest way to describe it. So when you're trying to build a service of that scale, that customers can trust and rely on, there is a lot to solve in terms of technical challenges, like resilience, the security of the service itself, scalability, performance. So lots of very interesting, like, by the way, those are things I love to do. Like that's what, that's the really fun part of the job. The other thing is that there is some education to be done in the market. So I talked a little bit about the innovator's dilemma. And one of the interesting things about whenever you have a new tech cycle, we are right now in the innovation phase of a new tech cycle. There's a lot of noise. And 100 people are trying to think about 100 ways in which to solve the AI security problem. So to some degree, it's hard for enterprises to figure out what will work. So the way I think about this is you think about what the stable state is likely to be, and then you work backwards to see what solutions work. And to me, the stable state will be that the application layer will continue to evolve for another decade. Like we are still in the very beginning of the AI revolution. We are just getting started. But the data and all the other applications and things that operate the business are going to be more stable, static, whatever you want to call it. So that disconnect has to be managed with a intermediating layer. And that's what I think is going to be the approach that will win. So yeah, I think challenges, there are some technical challenges. They're not really the biggest issue. The bigger challenge is really in a noisy market, how do you explain it to customers, which model to trust? And really, I can assure you that the generative AI market right now is full of hype, noise, and it's really hard for customers to figure out what to do.
So speaking of challenges, what challenges have you faced in building SmartVerify, whether technological, market adoption, or organizational, and how are you overcoming them?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a more first principles view that I am taking about data security. So my biggest challenge has been it takes time for people to come along and see why I'm saying what I'm saying, rather than, hey, we should just do non-human identity, or why don't you put some guardrails around AI agents, and that should be sufficient. So I think educating the market has been one of the biggest challenges. And what I have found is that people who are actually working with AI, so occasionally I have been contacted by customers rather than me reaching out to customers, and it's always interesting to see who they are. These are folks who are actually building AI applications. Sometimes they are consulting companies, sometimes they are application builders. And then they realize that actually data security is not going to be a part of the application anymore. And they need a separate data security solution that customers can in fact trust. So it's interesting to see these signals of when people reach out to me. And it just tells me that we are a little early in the market where people are still figuring out the signal from the noise. But all good signals on what the right answer should be. So I'm pressing on.
So as a leader in such a cutting edge field, how do you keep clarity of vision while navigating uncertainty and rapid change?
Yeah, I think I definitely have the benefit of a lot of really good experience. My entire career has been enterprise, B2B, software and services. I'm very grounded in how they think about adoption, the challenges of migrations and changes in the enterprise. And when I think about the vision, like I also had the benefit of being at AWS. So I had insight into the latest. I had chance to collaborate with the Bedrock team before Bedrock was really launched as a service on AWS. So it's a really interesting combination of both backwards looking and forward looking, if you will. And then I would say that what helps with clarity is really customer feedback at the end of the day. At the end of the day, when you talk to your customers and you start to become more clear what their real blockers are, a lot of learning to do on the technology side as well, quite honestly. Like every day, I feel like I have to keep up to date with what's the latest that's happening. So all of these things have to be boiled together to keep up that clarity and vision. Like I said, I think about working backwards from what I think the stable future will be. That gives me the North Star to work with.
So do you see AI as more of a risk amplifier or a security enabler?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Ambreen. So I think a lot of folks actually see AI as a security enabler. And I think there is a view in the industry that compliance and security are going to be AI fighting AI. Like that's the view. I actually don't buy into that view. So I actually believe AI is more of a security risk right now. And the reason I don't believe that is because it's really permutations. Like when you think about the consumption increase, like AI accesses data for everything. We are talking about 1,000-time consumption increase, 1,000 times more access to your data from identities you cannot track. They could be ephemeral. We saw that on the cloud when people moved to the cloud. Now suddenly they had like 500 EC2 instances and 200 RDS instances, and it became hard to keep track of the resources. And some resources were ephemeral. And now same thing is about to happen with non-human identities. So when you look at that explosion in complexity, you don't fight complexity with complexity. That's not a winning proposition. The way you fight complexity is you step back and you ask yourself, how do we simplify this system? What's the right place to decouple such that this complexity becomes moot? And that's the strategy we are trying to adopt.
And then how should enterprises balance openness with control in data sharing?
Yeah, so like I said, generative AI is huge. Like we are talking about a whole different level of productivity that enterprises can achieve. I would say that a few things. One is data security has not been a topic in most enterprises. It's really a part of application security organization. Like AppSec is the most powerful organization in most enterprise security groups. There is definitely a need to allocate resources to data security as a topic because you will need to expose your data. It's a given. You want to do it safely. It's a given. You need to start thinking about how that happens. Start identifying which data is most sensitive, most critical, and really thinking about what it is exposed to, and especially looking into your third-party access. So I think those are the initial places to start. But don't wait for IBM and Intel did not make the internet, happen. The folks who were the consolidators of the last tech cycles are not going to give you the answer. So you have to go and find the answers that you want to adopt as an enterprise would be my other message. You have to look.
Well, actually, that was my next question. So for CEOs and business leaders who are grappling with how to secure their data in an AI-driven world, what advice would you give?
Yeah, like I said, identify the most critical data sets, have the resources allocated in your organization to actually think about this topic, start looking into tools. So a lot of enterprises are focused on doing proof of concepts with AI. And like I said, some of those proof of concepts are already obsolete by the time they are done. Actually, some resources need to be spent on doing proof of concepts and testing of security solutions. So if you secure your data, the AI will come. And those solutions will start to mature and you will know what you want to adopt. You should still allocate resources to that, don't get me wrong. Also, it's important to think about how to overhaul your security processes and reviews to be much more data-centric rather than being much more centric about who has access to application. Because very soon, it won't matter who has access to the application. And I'll give you a small example. Let's say you give billing access. So you are a hospital, you have billing access codes which are being used for billing. You have an identity which has billing access. If AI has access to those billing codes, AI is a pattern matcher, and AI can actually use those billing codes to generate a clinical diagnosis. That was not the intention of the identity you gave access to. So in my opinion, honestly, if AI is attached to any identity, then all use of that data is in play. A billing person would have only done billing, but If AI gets the right prompt, it will do clinical diagnosis or whatever else you ask it to do using that same data. So long story short, the focus on application access is really no longer the right focus. And it's very important to overhaul all of your security processes to really ask yourself, what is the ultimate data access that's happening? So that's a big effort, but it really needs to be made.
So how do you handle skepticism from traditional security leaders?
I think it takes time. Like, it's not going to be a one conversation in which you change any minds, and I accept that limitation. But these are all smart people. And once you start to point out some of these issues, like, hey, the scale of AI is much larger. You will see so much data access that it becomes impossible to do observability at that point. You will get so many alerts that it's useless. The second thing is the scope of AI. What AI can do with your data is much larger. The third thing is the fact that the application vendor motivation is no longer aligned with your motivation. So you cannot just blindly trust applications anymore. And just testing application doesn't mean you got data security. People get it. It takes time. And, early adopters get it sooner. And then there are other folks who will take a little longer. And that's the way it is.
Wow. Kajal, thank you for sharing your insights on the future of data security and the role SmartVerify is playing in shaping how enterprises adapt to this AI era.
Yeah, these are exciting times, and good things will happen and bad things will happen, but I feel like I'm living very intensely every day and I'm loving it. So thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. To our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about Kajal and SmartVerify, visit smartverify.ai. Until next time, this is Ambreen Ahmed, and you've been listening to CEO Tech Talks.
Thanks, Ambreen.
Thank you for joining CEO Tech Talks. I hope today's conversation sparked new insights and inspiration for your own leadership journey. Until next time, stay inspired, stay visionary, and keep leading with light. Brought to you by Neura AI Consulting.